The Joe Rogan Experience.
Modern psychology has been weaponized. It's been intentionally weaponized in the context of military activities in the domain that, one way to express it, the term is used, the kind of term of art in military jargon is fifth-generation warfare, or you could call it psychological warfare. And what it distinguishes the present from, say, Sun Tzu and, ancient propaganda has always been part of warfare in humans. But we haven't had the digital world. We haven't had modern psychology. We haven't had nudge technology. We haven't had all these tools that allow the control of information, thought, perception, feelings, emotions that have become commonplace. And that, is and has this suite of technology and capabilities that we saw deployed in all of us were built in a kind of a structured way, largely by UK and US leadership in the intelligence community, as a weapon of war to counter these successful insurgencies that we keep losing wars over. Vietnam being a notable example all the way through Afghanistan. And so that's why it was built. But then that tech got deployed by governments against their own citizens. And this was really launched in large part in the United States by a presidential directive from Barack Obama. I'm not making this up. You can look it up. And by the way, the presidential directive is still in place that established the nudge technology units in the United States. They were already operating in the UK. And in the UK, it's quite advanced. When you look at UK politics right now and what's going on there with all the censorship and everything, this is no joke. We're barreling right to that endpoint, same as Canada has. We're just a little bit behind. And we have the benefit of the First Amendment in a constitution, and often on courts, but they don't have those obstacles, and the government believes in the UK that once they have won an election, it's perfectly acceptable to deploy this modern psychology and information control technology on their own population. And I argue that once that Rubicon is crossed, the idea of democracy, because the tech is so powerful, becomes completely perverted. And we got a good hard taste of that during COVID. What you and I experienced, what you experienced with ivermectin, what you experienced with, just talking about your own experiences, and the blowback that happened after we did that little hit, is a super powerful, clear case study in understanding this intersection of modern psychology, warfare technology, and the digital world, and algorithmic control of information, the creation of digital avatars for all of us, the application now in present of artificial intelligence to custom craft messaging that gets fed into our digital domains on a regular basis in order to, sell us whatever, but also to shape how we think and to control what information we get access to all the time. Just to give an example, my wife, who does a lot of our research for our Substack, was talking to me the other day. She just gave me a couple examples where stories that were in corporate media in the United States that weren't listing certain key names or whatever. She said, I just go to the Hindustan Times. Hindustan Times is a great source for all the stuff that we're not allowed to see here in the United States. You're now in an environment, in an information environment, where you cannot rely but we all know that. You can't rely on corporate media, but the rules, the boundaries that are being set up about information are profound, and they're completely distorting our ability to process what's happening around us. Can I give you the example of what actually happened? You said in our example with the blowback in Spotify. This is documented by a report out from the House about COVID and what happened. And that report only carries just through to the early part of the vaccines, and then it stops. For some reason, they didn't really want to go down the road to the vaccines. They did talk a lot about the events around the, let's say, lab leak hypothesis, which is allowed. You're allowed in D.C. now to talk about that.
Finally.
Yeah, you're still, and
it was about 4 years later you were allowed
yeah,
to
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about it.
So what was documented was that the trail of events was that we had our discussion. That triggered, and this is going to sound bizarre, but this is what's documented. That triggered Coca-Cola Corporation to complain to the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, which is created by the World Economic Forum. It is one of these global aggregators that controls advertising. The Global Alliance for Responsible Media, which, by the way, had a dust-up with Elon Musk and lost, and they closed it down as a nonprofit. It still exists in other ways, but as a structure that could be sued by X, it disappeared when he stood up against it. But Global Alliance for Responsible Media had a socket with Google AdSense, by the way. So they control the advertising ecosystem, which kind of matters to Spotify. So Coca-Cola complains to GARM, saying, this guy Rogan, you got to shut him down, okay? You got to put pressure on Spotify. So Spotify gets the message from GARM that we're threatening to pull your advertising, okay? Now, what happens between that and your experience, I don't know. It's not transparent to me what you experienced. We all remember the Laurel Canyon crowd saying they were going to pull their catalogs, which they didn't actually own, right? That was another thing. And then they went after you with this mashup of N-word historic events. There was clearly a concerted effort to take out Joe Rogan, much more than to take out Robert Malone. And so then the question comes, well, why the heck would Coca-Cola be the socket with the Global Alliance for Responsible, one of the biggest advertisers in the world, right? Why would Coca-Cola give a hooey about what Joe Rogan said to Robert Malone on, New Year's Eve? Coca-Cola is really tight with the CDC. Coca-Cola has funded buildings at the CDC. Coca-Cola funds the CDC Foundation for the CDC, as does Bill and Melinda Gates, as done all the major vaccine manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. The appearance is, I can't verify this, that CDC acted through its ally, Coca-Cola. Why are they allies? What's Coca-Cola got to do with CDC? The angle there is that Coca-Cola wanted the CDC to get WHO to not implement restrictions and messaging about sugar use. Okay? They didn't want those messages. Remember, this is at the heart of the inverted food triangle now. The old food triangle was the product of sugar lobby. I mean, the sugar lobby is incredibly powerful because this stuff is addictive. I mean, it's like having the cocaine lobby, right? That's an interesting analogy because, of course, the history of Coca-Cola.
Right.
So sugar's addictive. The CDC, the Coca-Cola didn't want wanted the CDC to influence public health policy to avoid global positions on the risks associated with sugar intake, because it would potentially hurt their market share. They're a major globalized company. So that little ecosystem that I just described illustrates what we're dealing with here and the many ways that all of this kind of influence and messaging and signaling happens in this kind of integrated, horizontally and vertically, ecosystem that we live in right now. And one of the things that came out of that, you'll recall, was that you were asked, as I recall, you gave this, I've had a hostage video. I think that was close to a hostage video from you back in the day when you were saying, this is what I'm going to do. It was like out on your porch or something. I remember I was sitting around a campfire in Maui, quite literally, when somebody said, "Oh, did you just see this from Rogan?" And a matter of fact, I was sitting around Gavin DeBecker's campfire at that time, somebody that you know. And so the compromise was that there would be a little trailer put at the bottom of that episode. And by the way, you probably know that episode for a long time became very hard to find. It was basically blacklisted from the search engines, et cetera, et cetera. But it carries, and I think it still does, that little banner that says, you should go to the CDC if you want the true about COVID. And you can still find those kinds of banners popping up all the time on YouTube. If you talk about vaccines or COVID vaccines, that will get, if you pass the filters, if YouTube will allow that to still be up, because you didn't say something, whatever it is, then you'll get the little banner. Okay, that banner is pushed out by the nudge units at the CDC. Okay, that is nudge technology. It is all around us all the time, and it's basically still public policy consequent to the old Obama presidential directive that still hasn't been rescinded. I love President Trump. I think he's doing amazing things. I think he's amazingly brave. I just mentioned our friend Gavin DeBecker referred to Trump the other day when I saw Gavin in Maui as a once in 500-year leader, and that's not nothing coming from Gavin. And so I'm a big supporter, but the president has still left in place this mechanism that exists that directs the federal government to use nudge technology and related what I assert is psychological warfare technology on the American populace.
Right. This is from back in, what was it, 2015 or something like that?
Yeah, it's quite early. And then you had Obama's subsequent, like the notorious speech at Hoover, at Stanford, where he talks about in order to preserve democracy, we're going to have, basically he says we're going to have censorship,
right?
In order to preserve democracy or whatever democracy is.
For people that don't know what we're talking about, we're relating to the Smith-Mundt Act.
The Smith-Mundt, everybody focuses on Smith-Mundt.
Okay.
But as I examined Smith-Mundt, and we did an essay on this in the Substack, like 3 years ago, because that was the kind of the narrative that was coming out in, let's say, our side of alternative media.
Right.
And in my examination, Smith-Mundt's impact is a lot more limited. It has to do with Voice of America and some of those things. The broad impact wasn't quite, in my opinion, what was believed to be of enabling propaganda domestically. Mm-hmm. More specifically, there is a presidential directive that nudge technology, that established a nudge office, that nudge technology shall be used.
What
by
do they call it?
agents.
They don't call it a nudge office, right?
They I don't know. They've gone through various iterations, and I'm sorry I don't have the latest version. And it's kind of become decentralized.
It was called the Social and Behavioral Science Team. Wikipedia says that was stopped in 2017, but continued under the Trump administration the General Services Administration's Office of Evaluation Sciences.
There we go. Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of become, it's been, like I said, it's been pushed out into a lot of the agencies. Mm-hmm. They don't use that lexicon because then it's easy to find them.
Right.
Okay, there's other euphemisms they use to describe those kinds of activities, but it's become normalized. The weaponization of propaganda has become normalized.
There's the wording from
Overall, behavioral interventions or nudges like the ones implemented by OES have been found to be effective. In recent psychological science article, researchers identified several policy areas of interest, example, healthcare.
Here we go, 2015 is when it was implemented.
So 2015.
Executive order.
President Obama signs an executive order requiring federal agencies to incorporate behavioral insights into their evaluation efforts. That's a nice way of saying the use of propaganda on the American people.
Yeah, yeah.